is a proud mother of 3 granddaughters and has 7 grandchildren.
Wow.
She has been flying with her husband in their 1979 Cessna 172 since 1982. Ruth was fearful of flying in their little plane and decided to try to get over her fear. Passing the FAA written exam did not alleviate her fears. Ruth decided to take a couple of flight lessons. On her 3rd lesson, she became hooked on flying, saying, "It's a lot more fun sitting in the driver's seat." She became a pilot in September of 1995, earned an instrument rating in October of 1998. In 1997, Ruth joined the San Fernando Valley Chapter 99's, International Organization of Women Pilots. Through the SFV 99s, she found camaraderie and opportunities to volunteer at high school career days. Ruth has always been involved in youth organizations. She was a Girl Scout leader and softball coach with her children. She loved her job as a school administrative assistant in several Los Angeles Unified School District elementary schools. Shortly after receiving her private pilot certificate, Ruth started flying with the Experimental Aircraft Association's Young Eagle program. It's a free one-time introductory flight for kids 8 through 17. She has flown over 300 children on Young Eagle flights. Logan said that there were times when a kid would get out of the plane smiling ear to ear and say, "Wow, I love flying. How can I learn to do this?" Knowing the cost of acquiring a private pilot certificate, she knew the chances of achieving this dream would be unattainable for the kids from Pacoima. When asked by a Learning for Life executive to start an exploring post, that's the subsidiary of the Boy Scouts who oversees the Explorer program, for those who don't know, Ruth jumped at the chance. Once she was assured girls could participate. You know, there's that whole Boy Scout thing. Ruth and fellow 99 Lois Peck started Aviation Explorer Post 747 in 2002. With the sponsorship of the San Fernando Valley 99s, the Post was able to use their nonprofit number, thus starting down a wonderful path to help kids learn to fly, resulting in 22 pilots and 2 air traffic controllers.
Now we're up to 26. We're up to 26 now.
Wow,
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So I introduced my friend,
Yes.
Ruth Logan.
Dear friend, dear friend. I brought some visual aids, and it will become very painfully aware that I'm not the speaker. So bear with me. Anyway, I think what Brenda wanted me to talk to you guys was about the 99s. And we're going to segue into the exploring program that they actually helped us get going. So, let's see. Well, first of all, San Fernando Valley 99s is part of an international group. So there's like 5,500 women pilots that belong to the 99s. And in the U.S., there's like 100,000 pilots, male, female. 6% of those pilots are women. So we are a very small minority. I've been called sir so many times. Talking to an air traffic controller. No, it's a girl. So it's honestly one of the most exciting things you'll ever do if you ever want to learn how to do that. So one of the questions people ask me a lot is, okay, where did the 99s get their name? So where they got their name was way back in 1929. Because believe it or not, at the dawn of aviation, people were doing a lot of air racing. But the males raced and the females raced. So these female racers did a transcontinental air race. And when they ended up, and I forget where they actually ended up in, like Detroit or someplace like that. And they had had so much fun and found so much camaraderie, because they had this common passion, even though they came from very different backgrounds. And they decided what they wanted to do is start an organization so that they could mentor other women to fly and plus help support each other. Amelia Earhart was in those races. There's several other luminary, original women pilots that went on to do amazing things. But Amelia Earhart ended up being our first president. And where the name came from was they sent out invitations to every female pilot in the world at that point, which was 119. And they decided at the outset, whatever the number of people who actually joined, that was going to be the name of the group. And so they were stuck on 86 for a while, which would have been really, really bad. But luckily, 13 more women joined, so they became the 99s. And again, Amelia Earhart was our very first president. And today, even some of the gals that are in our chapter, they do a lot of air racing, and which you don't even hear about, people doing now. But it's one of the other women that was there was a gal by the name of Pancho Barnes, which you probably have never heard of. Anybody heard of her? She has.
I have. Her son runs the thingy up at Fox Field.
Yeah,
He's got
yeah,
that building
Barnes
up there.
Aviation, yeah. Well, Pancho Barnes was like kind of like a rival with Amelia Earhart, and they were completely opposites. Amelia Earhart was this darling, and she was pretty, and she was this and that. Plus, she had a husband that really promoted her. He was like a very successful businessman, but he also knew how to promote things. I mean, she had a line of luggage. There was Amelia Earhart luggage. There was clothing. There was all kinds of stuff. So, and she's the one you always saw in all the pictures. Well, Pancho Barnes and her would go back and forth. Amelia would win a race, and then Pancho Barnes would win the next one. Amelia Earhart would set an altitude record, while Pancho Barnes would go and break it. And I have to show you the first one. This is a picture of Pancho Barnes. I know you probably can't see it that well, but she actually was not a very pretty woman. And, like I say, all the women back in the early days actually when they flew their planes, they wore dresses. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, now we think, come on, who would do that? Well, they did. It was what women did. You always had, well, not Pancho Barnes. She had her, boots and her, totally decked out differently. And
maybe it's me, but any pilot is pretty if he or she can land the plane.
oh yeah, they did
We're good.
way more than that. I mean,
Yeah.
Pancho Barnes went on to in the early 30s when they started doing actually movies, and they were hiring pilots to you'd see the sky full of these little planes, and maybe they would be shooting each other or whatever. But they were doing stunts also. They were doing, flying underneath bridges, and they had people, the wing walkers, and just all this crazy stuff. But the studios kept wanting to up the game to get more and more dangerous stunts being done by these pilots. And several pilots were killed, in the production of these movies. So Pancho Barnes took the lead to form the Stunt Pilots Association, which is still in existence today, but she was the one who did it. And it was very hard to have Pancho Barnes come and say something like I'm doing right now, because every one of her sentences was peppered with expletives. She talked like a sailor. And how she got into flying was with her brother. And she ended up getting her license and he didn't. But even before that, she came from a very wealthy family. And so I'm not going to fast forward to the Depression, but she was kind of a wild gal. And so what she did is she was not a conformist at all. And so her parents put her into this boarding school, trying to get her straightened out. Well, she ran away from there, got on a horse, and was almost to San Diego by the time they found her. And then another time, a bunch of her friends got together, and they all got drunk, and they decided they would go down to the waterfront and, jump on a ship, a trawler. So the one they got onto was a trawler that was carrying ammunition and guns to the revolution in Mexico. So they ended up, both of them jumping ship at a port. And then they got donkeys and they were just going around drinking tequila and all this other stuff. But that's where she got her name, Poncho, was from that episode. And then after that, she came back and her parents said, you know, we've got to get this girl married and settle down. So they married her off to a minister, thinking that that was going to do it. And it didn't. She would buzz the church on Sunday. So after the Depression, her family lost all their money. So she ended up moving out to what is now Edwards Air Force Base. And she started a farm, put in a landing strip, and people from Hollywood started coming up. She had like a hotel, swimming pool, and it became, it was named the Happy Bottom Riding Club, right next to Edwards during the heyday of all the different Chuck Yeager and all those guys. Well, that's where they hung out, was at Poncho's. And she, you know, was rumored it was also a brothel. She always denied it, but, you know, we're all thinking it was really a brothel. And then the Air Force wanted to expand Edwards Air Force Base, and she didn't want to sell the land. So her place mysteriously burned down. And that was the end of it. She fought it, she took him to court and did everything, but she ended up losing. But anyway, there's a lot of very, the stories that some of these older pilots have. We actually had, at one time, 4 of the WASP in our chapter, and I don't know if any of you know what a WASP is. You know? Yes. And you know too. It's a woman air service pilot. And what they did is they ferried planes during World War II. When a plane came off of the production line, it was almost always a 99 that ferried it to where it had to go. And I always thought that they only did like the U.S. And then I went to this event where this lady showed up, a B-17 day at Van Nuys. And she's standing in front of the B-17 in her old uniform. And she says, and there was a bunch of kids there, and she looked like this big in front of the B-17. And so she tells the kids, she goes, you know, the only difference between now and back then is I was 18 and the plane was new. And she flew it to the RAF in Britain, unarmed. It wasn't armed until they got it there. And the WASP during during World War II, they actually did target practice with them towing banners, and the guys would shoot at the banners
and hope they didn't.
Yeah, but they were fabric airplanes, so they could take a bullet a lot better. But a lot of them, there was several that got killed, and then they all thought that they were going to be kept on, and eventually fly to the Air Force. So, or ended, they all got sent home. They didn't get any military benefits at all. They just now were awarded the gold medal, and so many of them already died. So it was one of those great, tragedies because, and then some of them did go on to still fly commercially, but it wasn't what they wanted to do. They wanted to fly, all the B-17s and the P-51s and all that. So anyway, so that's our history of the 99s. And from there, Brenda mentioned that, I started an aviation explorer post. And that is for kids to learn how to fly. And we now have 26 pilots, 2 air traffic controllers. There's pictures of some of the things that we've done. And it's a very extremely rewarding program. If anybody has any questions, you can interrupt me too. Anyway, what we do is we raise money. We have fundraisers. And we end up paying for half of their flight lessons. And some of them have gotten their license for free because every scholarship that comes around, we throw, if you're not filling out a scholarship, don't complain that you can't afford to fly, because if you're not doing, plus they have to do work. We do airplane washes, we did a pancake breakfast yesterday, and anyway, it is what it is. And I brought some other, some visual prompts here. This is actually the airspace around here. And I put that's really where Whiteman is. We're over here somewhere. I think you're still probably in Van Nuys airspace. But when you look at this, and the kids have to learn how to fly in this, just like adults. There's no junior pilot's license at all. And we have one of the most complicated airspaces around. I mean, if you can learn to fly here, you can fly anywhere. If you come from Nebraska, and most of the airports in the U.S. don't even have a tower, and then come here, and you're listening on the radio, and you're thinking, how do you even get a word in edgewise? I mean, if you were listening to an aviation radio right now, you would not believe what's going on above your head. I mean, it's just constant chatter, and sometimes you, and everybody thinks that, okay, everybody files a flight plan. You don't have to file a flight plan, and most people don't. Just because they're a pain in the butt. And what I usually do is when I take off and I'm going somewhere, I call it flight followed. So somebody's actually just watching me and giving me directions. But here, they don't have to give you that service unless you fly instruments, and they can say unable. So then you're not talking to anybody, and there's a lot of people flying around that are not talking to anybody. And even Whiteman Airport, it's a 24-hour airport where you can land and you can take off 24 hours a day. The tower's only open between 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, quick question. That's fascinating. Is there some way, I know this is really naive and ignorant question, but, for example, is there a separate frequency for commercial planes that are flying to Los Angeles, LAX from France and Australia than from, planes that are, so all this chatter is on the same frequency, basically? Wow.
To a point. It goes by altitude.
Oh, okay.
And so when you're flying at 30,000 feet, you're not going to have a little guy up there.
Okay.
And but everybody, so where the congestion comes in is because in different rules apply to different altitudes. But when you're coming into an airport, well then you're hearing, I'm hearing the Delta guys and in fact they'll,
Wow.
I'll hear the air traffic controller, okay, we got, maybe he's referring to my plane, we got a plane on your left side, or what, they don't say left side. It's usually 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock or something like that. And
Wow.
and if you go to a place like, say, Palm Springs, they have another airport just past that called Bermuda Dunes. And so Bermuda Dunes doesn't have a tower.
Oh, great.
Wow.
And they're flying biz jets in there.
Oh my
And because it's easier. And I had a friend who lived right there, because they had houses on the airport. And when they were mowing their lawn, if a plane came by, they would have to almost stop because the wings were going over their lawn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So
God bless the air traffic controllers. I just can't
Yeah.
imagine that.
and it can
Wow.
drive them crazy because, and especially when you're like Van Nuys Airport, can you imagine how many? Because
Yeah,
that's
it's just-
like
wow.
for a while it was the busiest general aviation airport in the world.
Yeah.
And I think they've dropped to second. I don't know who got the first place, but now I think they're number 2. So they have so many landings and takeoffs, and they're having to mix in, a jet
A helicopter. And,
or a Piper Cub.
Yeah.
A Piper Cub that's going.
All coming in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
so you got the people that have to go fast, and then this little fly that's going along and try to, get everybody.
Yeah.
Or at LAX, they're only dealing with the big guys. The guys at Van Nuys have a lot tougher job, way tougher job.
Ruth, in your introduction, Brenda mentioned that you overcame fears. Was it fear of flying or fears in general?
No, fear of flying.
Of flying?
Yeah, because, the turbulence, in a
Right.
small plane, you feel everything. And it was, I kept thinking my husband was, doing this stuff on purpose.
I'm curious how you feed kids into these programs. Where are they coming from? How do the young people get to participate in this?
Well, hopefully, if you know a kid who says, "Gee, I want to learn how to fly," that you would give them my number. We do fairs. We go to schools. Right now, a lot of it has been word of mouth because I got a whole bunch of kids. The last batch were all from Santa Clarita, and they all went to the same school.
And what's the cost impact to a kid who gets involved? To them and their family, what's their cost impact? Because I know you said about half of it gets scholarship.
Right. Well, let me give you an idea of how much it costs to get. Well, here's one example. If you want to be an airline pilot right now, and you haven't learned how, and that's your goal, and you start from private pilot, and you have to go up all the steps, it's going to cost you $100,000 to get there. And so that kind of gives you an idea of how much it costs. But for the little guys, the rule is to get your license, you have to have 40 hours of a combination of instruction and flying solo. And then you have to pass a written test, and there's a medical test, and that type of thing. So it depends on where you go, how much that hour is going to cost you. If you were to go to Van Nuys and say rent a plane for an hour plus an instructor, it's going to cost you about $150 an hour. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Multiply by 40, and very few people are getting it at 40 hours right now because they keep adding on more stuff.
Right.
More regulations. Somebody crashed, another regulation, another thing, another hoop that you have to jump through. So basically, what I've heard is right now it costs about $10,000 to maybe $15,000 to learn to fly. What we've done is we have this guy, this really wonderful guy right now, who owns a Cessna 150, which is a 2-seater, very small plane, but it doesn't burn much fuel. And so he's teaching the kids. He's an instructor. He can have 5 people on his plane for the insurance, and we've got the cost down to $110 an hour
Per kid.
per kid, per the 40. And our kids have been getting the license at 40 hours. So we had a kid that soloed at 7.4, which is unheard of.
So, now, I'm
Yeah.
trying to be clear because we do interact with a number of schools. If there are kids that have this interest, then their families should be looking then, it sounds like, at about a $5,000 to $8,000 commitment on the family's end.
We figure around 6,
Okay.
but then
Well,
we pay,
okay,
and
yeah.
then we pay half.
Oh, so it's really about $3,000 to the
$3,000.
family.
I mean, that's what we budget. Is that for each kid we're going to have to come up with. Well, plus we have a limit.
Right.
If it's going to take you 100 hours to learn how to fly, that's
not it,
we're
yeah.
not going to pay that. You have to. We'll go up to like 60 hours and still pay, but we really expect them to carve out that time that they're going to be flying, a couple days a week, and really have their nose to the grindstone. And you have to do that. And a lot of times with adults even, they'll start flying, and then guess what? Life happens. And you can't fly for a month, or you can't fly for 6 months. Well, you're starting over again. And so your cost keeps going up. So we tell them, don't even start, unless you had that carved out. And then another way we monitor it is because we don't say, okay, we're going to pay for half of your lesson, here's the money. They have to complete at least 4 lessons a month, then we reimburse them.
Mhm.
So if they're not flying on a regular
Smart.
basis, they're not going to get reimbursed.
Yeah.
So we keep them on task by doing that
Great.
with it over their head. So that's it in a nutshell. But we've had a lot of success. It covers every part of STEM. They got to learn about weather. They got to everything.
Now, I thought I heard you say, or somebody say, that you start with kids age 8.
That's for the one-time flight.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
For this
another place that we get kids, because that's where when we
They
take
find
them on
out.
that one-time flight, everybody at the airport has my number.
But this is, I'm assuming, high school and up.
14. We don't let them start.
Eighth grade.
Or flying it?
Yeah.
You're learning to fly it. at
Well,
14.
we don't. You could do that, but if you do that, you're probably just throwing your money away for a short period of time because, like all these things on TV where you see kids flying planes, there's another pilot. The FAA would not allow that.
Yeah.
You have
What is
to
the
have
minimum age? 16?
16. You can get your license.
Yeah.
No, 17. You can get your license.
16 to solo,
16
right?
to solo. 16 to solo.
8.
You can get a glider rating at 14. So that's a place to start. And that's a lot of fun.
I was fascinated by a statement on the movie Sully, because you're mentioning a lot of the costs are driving up by regulations and all that. And one of the things that came out of that movie was the first officer in Sully kept mentioning the human factor and flying. And one of the statements that really hit me hard, because working for the U.S. government for 32 years, if we would have followed all the rules, 155 people would be dead.
Exactly.
Is there a sense of when these kids are taught, in fact, for example, do they do some, simulations, or they look at when things
Well, they
might
have to go through the
wrong
whole
and
train,
get
yeah.
a judgment?
Stall training,
Okay.
emergency landings. Most instructors, when you're flying with them and they're teaching you, you'll supposedly you're going to be going someplace or you're going to go out and do a maneuver. And they'll go, hey, you just lost your engine.
Well, fascinating.
Yeah, and what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And then you figure out, because most of the small planes have a pretty good glide ratio.
Yeah.
So altitude is your friend. The higher you are, the further you're going to be able to get and the more options you have. It's like actually the airport environment within 5 miles of an airport is where most accidents happen. Because of, again, everybody coming in and maybe
Yeah.
not reporting where they are correctly and that type of thing. But, anyway,
Can I squeeze back in history a tiny bit? I'm interested to know if the 99s group, there were some female aviators who were briefly considered, and it's a history I should know more about and I don't, for the space program. And then
Yes.
they weren't,
yes.
but there was that story that for all, I enjoy learning about the space program. That's an aspect
That was another one where they were, in fact, I know one of the gals that was in that program. Her name is Wally Funk. Is that the great?
I think I've heard,
Yeah.
Yeah.
recognized that name
Yeah,
because of that.
because I don't know if she's a teacher. I think she was. I think she became a teacher. But anyway, she's also on a lot of the TV programs and stuff because of that, because so many people didn't know that happened. That's where they found out that women could take more G's than men. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, so it's a very colorful history. So I think that's
To answer Todd's program about recruiting, because there are other aviation explorer posts in the San Fernando Valley besides Ruth.
Yes.
I know that from when I worked for the Boy Scouts. There had been an aviation career day every spring. I know they did it in 2016.
Well, at Van Nuys
At
Airport,
Van
we used
Nuys
to
Airport,
take
yes.
the Daniel program. I
Yes.
used to chaperone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
well,
still
we
do
used
that,
to
yeah.
we used to bus, and I was on the committee for many years, and we would bus in hundreds of kids.
Oh, yeah,
Actually, it would hit over 1,000. But we bust in from every school in the San Fernando Valley to get the kids interested. And I know every year Ruth and the 99s had a booth set up recruiting those kids. So
We used to, until last year, Stephen Shafter and I used to every year take a busload of kids.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So that's
that,
another
that was
place.
that was a really good recruiting tool, was going to that career.
But
day.
even though, you know, we would have a sign up, okay, are you interested? And we would come back with, 50 kids.
Yeah,
Follow up on them, we're having.
maybe 4 or 5 of them actually.
Or none.
Or none.
None. Sometimes there's none. And then another thing is you have to have the parents'
Consent.
consent. And, like I had a parent once when this kid was ready to solo, which you have to do.
Yeah.
And she was, oh, he's not ready yet. And I'm going, hold on, the flight instructor says he is. Wouldn't do it if he wasn't ready. And she decided on her own that he wasn't ready. He never got his license.
No.
So
Oh,
that the
Lord.
parent you have to have really brave parents, because that's a hard thing to do. Because I know one of my daughters started flying and soloed, and it's a hard thing to see your kid,
Up on their own.
yeah. So I really admire the parents that can do that, because it's anyway, because that's what the kid wants to do. So anyway, no more questions, and thank you for having me. And I know what Rotary Club does, and it sounds like you have a great organization.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.